welcome to Wednesday Debate with Tagreed Hussein here on Nile TV International. Well, tonight we have a recap of a very important presidential tour currently taking place. As we know that the president's visits, whether state, official or working, all serve to shape and further the country's foreign policy, and in some cases they definitely alter even the course of history. That is true for a country that like Egypt, with all the regional and international status and weight that Egypt has, and where the presidential visits definitely assume great importance and great significance. From Asia to Europe, President Sisi spent this week in a significant presidential tour from Saudi Arabia to Germany, and the current stop also in Serbia. Well, a very important tour, and I'm having all the honor and pleasure of reading the presidential messages and the significance of the president's visit in each one of those stops with His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Mohamed Hegazy, former assistant to the Foreign Minister. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
My pleasure, David.
Always adding value on Nile TV. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Well, together we'll be reading this important presidential visit and also highlighting more messages, as I said, right after this report, highlighting the presidential visit and a speech at a very important and a joint press conference with the Serbian president earlier in the day.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi delivered a speech during a joint press conference with Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić, during which al-Sisi affirmed Egypt's aspiration to strengthen cooperation with Serbia in all fields. President al-Sisi also stressed that the Egyptian stance is based on addressing all the means leading to a peaceful solution to the conflicts in the region, making all efforts to achieve this, whether at the bilateral, regional or international levels. The President underscored the importance of finding alternatives and solutions that allow peoples evade the negative effects of the Russian-Ukrainian crisis. In his speech, President al-Sisi stated that his visit to Serbia reflects the importance of Egypt attaching to the bilateral relations between the two countries, aiming to foster it to broader horizons and a more distinguished level. President al-Sisi emphasized that the meeting with the Serbian president came as culmination of the joint efforts exerted over the past period to advance bilateral cooperation between the two countries and to develop an integrated strategic framework which carries a common vision, paving the way for a new phase of the partnership linking the two countries. The president also added that at the international level, he exchanged with the Serbian president visions and views on various topics and issues of common interest, on top of which are the current developments in the Middle East, the Palestinian issue, and the situation in Libya. The discussions also dealt with Egypt's effort to mobilize the international community to combat climate change, which is reflected in Egypt's keenness to host the World Climate Summit next November in Sharm el-Sheikh. In this regard, President al-Sisi invited his Serbian counterpart to participate in the World Climate Summit COP27 in order to contribute to putting the world on the right path towards transforming pledges and promises into actions on the ground. In conclusion, President al-Sisi expressed his appreciation and gratitude to the Serbian president for granting him the Order of the Republic of Serbia, expressing his aspiration that the coming period will witness more cooperation and coordination between Egypt and Serbia in order to achieve the prosperity of the two friendly peoples.
Egypt opens up to the world. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi meets with world leaders.
وأعبر لكم عن خالص الشكر والتقدير على حفاوة الاستقبال.
Ambassador, the visit to Serbia, a very significant visit, and definitely, as we can see, there is a link also with a prior visit to Germany.
Indeed. I think it is a very important tour, starting from the summit in Jeddah of security and development, then to Europe, economic and most relevant country nowadays because of its proximity to the conflict of the Russian and Ukrainian parties. But the most important about the visit to Serbia is that it revived historical ties that always exist between Egypt and Serbia, 108 years of relations, and most importantly, the very important ties that was between the two countries during the President Nasser's time and Joseph Broz Tito of Yugoslavia, and their establishment in 1960 of the non-aligned movement. The first visit of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to a very important center in Central Europe and to the Balkan, to Serbia, to further enhance relations with one also of the coming European economy, and a very promising investment coming from Serbia to Egypt. And for that, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi hosted today with the Serbian president the first meeting of the business session between the two countries. The community of business leaders in the two countries who can definitely drive the relations to a height that we all hope for, to meet the historical and political ties between the two countries. The visit came on a very important and crucial moment to the history of Europe and to the impact it has been endured because of the Russian invasion to Ukraine. And I think with the very known and strong ties between Serbia and Russia, what will be discussed in Belgrade today will not be very far from the hearing of Moscow. I think Serbia can play also a catalyst between what has been achieved maybe in Jeddah and what has been said also in Berlin to President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. And when he discussed this with the Serbian president, I don't think that the information will only stay between the two capitals, and it will go definitely to Moscow to show what is the vision of the Western leaders to the current situation. And because of the stature of both leaders in Serbia and Egypt, I think Moscow can listen to what has been said in these very two important stops in Jeddah and in Berlin. That, I think, one of the most important reasons of this visit. But because of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi always present Egypt as an investment opportunity, the Serbian business community can definitely add value to the Egyptian advances in many fields. And as you may recall, the foreign minister of Serbia visited Egypt last August, and in his visit he agreed with foreign minister Shukri to establish the Egyptian Serbian Business Community Council, as well as the Egyptian Serbian Joint Commission. At that time, I think a few months later, the two ministers of defense have signed a very important protocol enhancing the defense ties between the two countries. So we are talking not only about strategic relations and historical ties that goes back 108 years, so a century of strong ties between the two countries, but also an opportunity to convey to the warring parties a message of quest from two leaders of certain weight in Serbia and in Cairo, and a leadership of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who listened to, maybe even in the bilateral discussion with President Biden of the United States in their bilateral meeting in Jeddah. And he passed it definitely to the Serbian counterpart, who definitely are close to Moscow, and I'm sure that those kind of consultations are of crucial importance in this very critical time Besides that, Serbia also is able to help and support the Egyptian business drive, as well as investment opportunity, as I said. And I'm sure that Egypt also can exchange whatever it can in the field of energy security and in this very crucial moment where the food value chain is broken in many ways, and the agriculture product in Serbia can also be part of the Egyptian imports. A lot can be talked about from cultural, historical, and business orientation. But before we leave that, the need for the non-alignment movement principles that was celebrated last October for 60 years can be also one of the most important drive to such visit, to revive the ties with the non-aligned movement and to bring the principles that brought us to a certain balance between what we see today after the conflict in Ukraine.
Yes, a very significant visit, as His Excellency has pointed out, and it is considered to be actually the first formal visit by an Egyptian president in Serbia in nearly 5 decades. We have seen earlier in the joint press conference, the president stated that he agreed with his Serbian counterpart on the importance of continuing this sense of mechanism of political consultations between both countries. They are talking about the joint committee for science, for technical as well as scientific cooperation in the future, strengthening this sense of coordination between the two countries. So we're fostering new relations, and with Egypt becoming an energy hub, as Your Excellency has actually pointed out. So this gives another framework in the sense of cooperation between both countries.
Absolutely, Tyreen. I think one of the aspects that we have to also discuss is that the president in his relations with Europe, or Egypt in general, with its relations with Europe, is trying to create links with different circles inside the European Union. Say, for example, the historical ties with France and Germany is known, but the new established relations with the fish-grade countries today, with the Balkan and Central European countries, as well as the institutional relation that exists between Egypt, Cyprus, and Greece. Those are circles of influence inside the European Union. It's not only about the Commission, which we have very strong ties also, and we have signed together a partnership agreement a couple of weeks ago, in which, as you stated, the energy security issue was brought to discussion because of Egypt's ability to produce more gas in the time where Europe are very much in need because of the ties with Russia and the need to support the European supplies. I think Egypt, as you said, is a hub for gas production in the Eastern Mediterranean, and for that I think the President will do, and Egypt will do all what it can to support its historical partners in Europe.
Always on top of the list, wherever His Excellency goes, and in the heart of the Egyptian foreign policy comes the Palestinian issue, and actually talking the current developments in the region, and the situation in Libya has been also on the list of discussions with the Serbian president.
In his meetings in Jeddah, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, in his eloquent speech, has given a clear message about the need to stabilize the region through facing the question of Palestine, and the respect for international law and the two-state solution was shared by all the Arab leaders participating in Jeddah. So bringing it to the Serbian table of discussion is logical. Serbia has been always, even as an integral part of former Yugoslavia, has been always a supportive to the right of Palestinian. It shared with Egypt the adherence to the two-state solution, as it has been reflected today in the press conference of the two presidents. But what is important is that the Palestinian issue has gained through the visit to Jeddah and the Summit of Security and Development, and in the heart of Berlin with the new Chancellor Olaf Scholz, a new momentum. It has been endorsed in Serbia, it's true, but out of the three legs of this very important tour, the Palestinian issue has been always in the heart and mind of all the leaders speaking in Jeddah, in Berlin, or in Serbia as well.
Yes. Talking also economic and regional cooperation has been there on the list, and those are considered to be the components of Egypt's foreign policy, talking the new republic.
Yes, I agree. In all his foreign visits, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi always keen to present Egypt as an investment opportunity.
Yeah.
And no time more needy to present Egypt in this way than those times where a lot of pressure is put on our economy and a lot of disruption in the value chain, being it food or the height of the oil and gas prices, and the need really to further enhance our economy and our partnership, being it with the German party, as you have seen the president leading the business council both in Berlin or in Belgrade, inviting also our partners in Europe to see for themselves. As you may recall, in October last year, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the Egyptian government invited a group of business leaders, politicians, parliamentarians, journalists from Serbia to Sharm el-Sheikh to get acquainted with the Egyptian successes and its newly established infrastructure and the, of course, important economic drive and the reform program that we have undertook with a lot of pressure, but we have successfully made it clear to the world that we are very serious. We have a new infrastructure, and we have a new economy, and we have a political will to cooperate. So I think what has been echoed today in Serbia and before in Berlin will be always with us during the coming years, so that Egypt can gain out of what it has achieved over the last 8 years in terms of infrastructure, in economic reform, and those are the times that we really need our partners. For that, such an important visit starting from Jeddah to Berlin to Serbia means that President Sisi and Egypt means business.
Yes, and prior to Serbia, a very important stop in Germany, in Berlin, co-chairing the 13th edition of the 13th Petersburg Climate Dialogue. That is considered to be a very important stop, and as Egypt definitely is preparing for COP27, the whole eyes of the world are going to be attracted to the mother of the world. So how do you see the link, Mr. Ambassador?
Being ambassador to Germany 2015, I attended on the 3rd of June the very important and historical visit of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to Berlin, where we have signed the most important contract with Siemens of 8 billion euros, as well as the huge machinery that has been used in digging the tunnels under the Suez Canal, besides the many strategic contracts that we signed with Berlin. At that time, I think Germany understood that there is an important change happened in Egypt, and when 33 million people were in the street, Chancellor said this is truly a revolution. And since then she's always saying, and after 7 meetings, summits with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, that the success of Egypt is success for Europe and for Germany. Stabilizing the region is, I think, an interest for Germany. This is the first visit where President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi meets with the new Chancellor Olaf Scholz, the SPD, the Green, and the Liberal Democrat has become now the coalition that is leading Germany. So opening gates and this channel of discussions with Olaf Scholz was very important to continue the very trustworthy and respect that both leaders, Chancellor Merkel and President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, enjoyed over the years. Germany is an important partner, not only because it is Europe's first economy or world fourth economy, but Germany has always invested in Egypt and invested in stability in the Middle East, supporting Egypt not only in confronting terrorism, but economically and I'm sure politically it has been really a great partner. Where today, besides the three very important contracts I spoke to you about with Siemens, who have changed and transformed the electricity generating sector in Egypt and put it to a world stage, but also Germany is building and constructing with Egypt the most important modern railway with Siemens as well, with 8 billion euros, and I think the German government have considered this project a state project. The political issues that is also on the agenda was mainly the regional issues, particularly Libya, Palestine and Yemen, where in Libya and Yemen Germany has always strong links. You remember that after the Cairo Declaration, the Berlin First Conference and the Second Conference on Libya helped a lot in launching an international campaign to stabilize the situation in Libya and to establish election, both constitutional and presidential, in the near future. And both the Chancellor and the President have talked about the importance of accelerating the Libyan political process, thanking Egypt for its continuous effort to work towards the same end. Berlin is a very important also European capital where the Palestinian cause, when echoed, particularly in this very important time, I always recall Jeddah summit for security and development. If the Arab issues, being it of political nature or the economic problems caused by the pressure put on the economies of the region because of the Russian-Ukraine confrontation, the hike of the prices of the oil and gas, all that requires really a discussion of this nature with the German Chancellor, who met President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi for the first time, and of course the rest of the German leaders. But as you may remember that before giving his very important speech at St. Petersburg Forum, he met also with Annalena Baerbock, the head of the Green Party, the Green Party, and also the one who can talk really about environment. And in his speech, and said at St. Petersburg joint leadership meeting by Germany and Egypt, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi spoke about the importance of truly supporting Africa, where we only contribute 4% to the emission while we pay in Africa the very hefty cost of this emission caused by the first world. So he was calling the world community to carry their responsibility and to support Africa in adopting initiatives, in adapting to the climate change, and in fulfilling their promises, because as you know, the Paris conference has heard many pledges from many government and capitals, particularly from 10 most important emission producers to the third world, and no one really adhered to his commitments. So President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi talked about this, what he called it fatal challenge that is facing humanity, and we have to cooperate. We have to confront the challenge in a cooperative way. And he insisted to say that Sharm el-Sheikh COP27 will be the COP for implementation, for everybody to adhere to his commitment. This important challenge has to be faced with joint effort, and no one really escape the responsibility and the promises they have given to Africa and to the third world.
Yes. In the president meeting with the German Minister of Foreign Affairs, Annalena Baerbock, on Tuesday, he said that there is no way to settle the crises in the Eastern Mediterranean, in Libya, in Syria and Yemen, except through political solutions. So Egypt is always keen on political solutions in settling those crises.
Indeed, and I think no time in our history we need to reiterate this message than now, where the European front is disrupted because of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and the continuation of the suffering of our people in our region because of the continuation of certain conflicts. Say one conflict in Europe has brought Europe to its knees, as you may see now in the Russian-Ukrainian confrontation. But in our region, though the geography is limited, we are confronting the Palestinian continuous problem, the Libyan, the Syrian, the Yemeni, and we still call the Middle East one of the most important and strategic, and that has been reflected in President Biden meetings with the Arab leaders and in the inauguration speech at the Jeddah Security and Development Summit. And I'm sure that what has been heard during this conference was very important about the Palestinian issue, about the 5 pillars President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi indicated for creating an atmosphere of stability in the region. And I think the messages were very clear that we need to settle the old conflicts, particularly, and in the core and heart of it is the Palestinian issue and the Libyan, and the most important, confronting also terrorism and stopping those government that is transporting, supplying and training terrorism and foreign militias. And he called for the international community to stand firm against those countries which we all know by name.
Yeah.
The most important also about Jeddah, if I may continue. If you have a question, I can stop here.
Yes, sure. We're talking about still uniting Arabs, and whenever the president speaks and meets with different world leaders, we find Africa also in the heart of discussions, because Egypt is also speaking the heart and the beat of Africa. So the presidential efforts also to restore Africa's role in Europe has been quite a message in those visits.
Particularly in the most urgent issue, which is the climate change.
Right.
The president spoke on behalf of Africa long before in Paris, and he brought to Berlin St. Petersburg forum a very important message also about the need to adhere to the commitments and to implement in Sharm el-Sheikh COP27 what has been promised to Africa, and to help Africa in the transfer of technology, in initiatives that will help adaptation. And I think this message was heard. And what is important about the forum was that it set the agenda for COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. So whatever is said in Petersburg will be transcended into action plan in COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. So the importance of Africa being heard in St. Petersburg was so important, so that the president really gave the right message, and I'm sure that we all will feel that in Sharm.
Yes, and we can feel definitely the beat, as Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, had stated and talked about Egypt's leverage in the region and the important regional role that Egypt plays. Well, definitely a very important visit to Berlin while we are celebrating 70 years of the Egyptian-German relations. Short break and we'll be back. Saudi Arabia was also, of course, among the stops and the tours of the president attending the Jeddah Summit for Security and Development. And here, another importance and significance, messages and timing.
I think it was one of the most important regional and international summits that will, I think, bear fruit very soon. I think President Biden came to the region with two pillars agenda. One is related to the hike of the oil and gas prices and the need to further enhance world supplies, particularly with players like Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and after that with OPEC countries. The second most important pillar of President Biden agenda, I think, was to secure its allies vis-a-vis an agreement that will be soon signed with Iran, the 5+1, on the nuclear Iranian issue. And I'm sure that before signing such an important agreement, which I think it's a necessity, it has become a reality that 99% or 98% of this agreement is now on the table, and it will be signed because there is a need to bring Iran into the international oil market. That is a fact that we all have to live with. This is practicality, and this is world interest. Second, to secure two parties, to secure Israel, and I think the Declaration of Jerusalem have done that, with an American adherence to a promise, a pledge that we will never allow Iran to own a nuclear program, strategic program. While the second party that has to be also receive assurances and to secure their fear and interest was the Gulf countries. And this region is a hub to the American strategic approach to the Middle East in general, and it cannot be left like before during the Obama administration when they signed with Iran and leave the region and go without securing any interest of the Gulf countries. That will not happen again. And in the second phase of signing the 5+1 agreement with the new American administration, there will be a respect to the security of the Gulf. And the American president himself came to announce in Jeddah that the United States will strategically stay, the defense and strategic presence in the region will continue, and the United States for that has played, I think, a very important role in bringing more stability to the region by adhering to this position. And I think this position is also a requirement to the stability of the Gulf area and the Middle East in general, where I think an approach to develop ties between its countries is very important. That's why Egypt, Iraq, and Jordan were present in this summit, so that the regional approach to development is the second part of the name of, or the title of this conference, security. The United States will fill in the gap, and it will not allow maybe a strategic ties with China or Russia, that's known. But economic ties with Russia and with China will remain as important as it is now, but the strategic military and defense ties will remain with the United States, and I think that requires a need for the Gulf countries as well. The integrated approach to development in the region is so important, and in the heart of all that, when it comes to the need for political solutions, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi addressed 4 issues of certain of great importance, actually. One is the 5-axis approach is very important, including democracy, human rights, but the old ties, the old problems, the old conflicts like the Palestinian on the heart of it, the Libya, the terrorism, and the regional development were all among the many pillars President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi raised. What is important now is that we move together to bring more stability through resolving the current conflictive issue, as well as pushing countries, say Turkey is playing a negative role in Libya with the support to the military militias and the support they are giving to certain groups. They have to pull this rule out and to leave the Libyan to the rule of law where they can enjoy their wealth and stability. Second, the Palestinian cause has been echoed by all the Arab leaders present giving the American administration a clear message that we are ready to cooperate, but there is no regional integration to Israel unless we have the two-state solution on practice, where the Palestinian state on the border of 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital has been formed. The Palestinian state is the guarantor for the Israeli security, as Egypt and Jordan signed a peace agreement and brought stability for almost 50 years to the relations of Egypt, and similar to Jordan-Israeli relations, a Palestinian-Israeli agreement has to be forged, and that has to be fast and direct to the point, as indicated by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The Palestinian issue were one of the many gains, reiterating the Arab causes during this very busy time, where the international agenda are very preoccupied by many conflicts and disruptions of food security or energy security issues. So I think this summit was one of the most important events that happened in the region for many years.
Yes, and on the sidelines of the Jeddah Summit for Security and Development, the President held talks with US President Joe Biden, as it was the first time to meet after the latter took office back actually in January 2021. So it was a great chance for discussing future consultations and coordination between Egypt and the US.
Yes, the statement issued after this very important summit between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and President Biden by the White House indicates clearly what you have said, Tagreed. It is true that the two presidents are meeting for the first time, but the strategic dialogue between Egypt and the United States on the level of the foreign ministers were just taking place a few months ago, and the two presidents have praised this very important strategic dialogue and its outcomes. The defense relations with the United States are in its height. And I'm sure that the United States deep inside understand that Egypt is undertaking now a very important transformation, and a new country, not only a new capital, a new republic is in the establishment. And President Biden himself have spoken highly about the efforts Egypt is making to stabilize the region politically, and the role it has played in settling conflicts, particularly the role it plays to help the Palestinians and the Israelis to move ahead. If we also added to that the role of Egypt in Yemen and in Libya, and its role in confronting terrorism, all that has been included into the bilateral declaration that was established by the White House. And you can read into it that the United States value Egypt's role and value also the role of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
Definitely. President Biden congratulated President al-Sisi on Egypt's march and hosting the COP27 in November, next November, which is going to be a very important and a vital step forward, reaffirming the U.S. commitment to the successful conference. So the eyes of the world are going to be on Egypt vis-a-vis the COP27. How are we cooperating and coordinating in that respect with the different countries all over the world?
The United States is one of the main emitters or the main producers of emissions. So it is really one of the countries that when it had here and nominate even John Kerry as a special envoy to climate, it shows a new dimension in confronting this very important and crucial issue. If the United States is committed and the other countries are really working together, this is, as said by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the only way to confront climate change. It has become a reality, an important threat, and we cannot meet the zero emission in 2050 unless we move to reduce the current warming to 1.5. And if we reach that, no one really can do alone, and it is a transboundary issue that requires collectiveness and support of all nations, not only to their national programs, but to other continents like Africa, where we all need their support. And I'm sure that this will be the main outcome of the COP27 agenda in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Yes.
Before we close the discussion on climate change, COP27, I will refer to what has been said by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in Jeddah, in Berlin, in Serbia about water security. Because one of the issues that is also related to climate, most of the climate issues are water related. So if we see an international river like the Nile under a lot of pressure and threat from other Iberian countries, the reference made in his speech by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was very important. We're also in the bilateral talks with the German Chancellor, or even in the statement issued by the White House about the bilateral relations with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Biden. President Biden said that the United States respects Egypt's water security and called for the two parties to reach a comprehensive agreement in filling and operating of the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And I think this, and very soon, and by diplomatic measures, and I think this was one of the most important highlights, because the echo of such a statement in Berlin was clear when Olaf Scholz also talked about Germany support of reaching an agreement and German support for Egypt's water security.
Yes, definitely. Well, a very important summit meeting took place in Jeddah, and the president has already stipulated a comprehensive 5-axis approach on the priority issues in order to achieve a more prosperous and a more stable region. Let's watch the highlights in this infographic. And the main pillars reflected, as we've seen in the infograph, and shows also how Egypt is really keen on protecting Arab national security.
Absolutely. I think in protecting Arab national security, the call was very clear that countries that intervening in the Arab world affairs, and I think he speaks clearly about Turkey and Iran, and they have to understand the principles of international law and the respect for border security, and also for stopping financing terrorist groups as well as the military arming militias, armed militias in Libya or other part in the Arab world, and supporting certain groupings, say like Houthi in Yemen. That is challenging now, for example, the truth between the belligerent parties. And I'm sure that President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, when he speaks about Arab national security, he calls on the international community to carry their responsibility in this field and stopping those countries from intervening in Arab affairs. And I think the United States can play a role vis-a-vis Iran and Turkey and tell them clearly that the agreement 5+1 doesn't mean that you intervene in the internal affairs or supporting certain parties indirectly, like in Lebanon, Hezbollah, or in Yemen, in Houthi, and in Iraq, or in Syria. You have to understand that this agreement has to contain this aggressive policies, which has rendered all those countries into pariah states, say in Yemen, in Libya, or the suffering of our people in Syria and Iraq for many years because of these interventions. And if we're talking about regional security will only happen through cooperation and integration and respect of international law. If we talk about also the Arab national security, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, in his final statement on this pillar, said it clearly that if the international community and the regional parties did not respect the Arabs, will defend their national security by all comprehensive means possible in their hands.
Yes, well, very important tour, Saudi Arabia, Germany and Serbia, and it shows Egypt's keenness definitely in order to have balanced relations with different countries all over the world, which are considered to be the components of the foreign policy in the new republic.
If I understand well, the Egyptian foreign policy, after stabilizing the internal situation, being it economic or political, facing the battle of terrorism, and now facing the battle of development of new infrastructure, Egypt is keen to stabilize also the region. You cannot succeed internally while your region is in suffering, and for that we are playing a very constructive role always in Palestine, in Libya, in Syria, Iraq, in Yemen, because stabilizing the Middle East was the first quest put in the pillars of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, facing the old and new challenges and conflicts, and also our position towards the Russian-Ukraine. All that is a quest for peace, for stability, for development, and this is the role of Egypt. And I think President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is presenting himself now on the world stage as a statement who adhere to peace, stability, and in a country that is really questing for stability for the whole region and for the benefits of all its people. It's not only a quest for Egypt, but it's a quest for the region and for peace and security worldwide.
Yes, and many tools are actually reflected, diplomatic tools, reflected during the foreign visits of the president abroad. We could see the effect, the vital effect of diplomacy on everyone's life, and sending messages definitely.
Yes, and I'm sure to agree that this role is needed in a region where truly we are all facing a lot of, or faced even a lot of sufferings, and time has come that we all realize, being it in Israel, that only through peace with Palestine that you can really contain the ongoing fighting and ongoing conflicts and ongoing sufferings. If we talk about Libya, stability will allow benefits to everyone, and the competition that is existing now and the intervention of regional parties has to stop. And it will only stop if the international community play its role, and if the Arab unity, as it was reflected, one of the main, I think, successes of Jeddah was the firmness of the Arab world. All leaders have spoken clearly about the Palestinian issue. So if President Biden returned back, understanding that the need for an integrated approach to development will require a clear confrontation to regional conflicts, and in the heart of it is the Palestinian cause. And settling the Palestinian cause is not only a political requirement, it's also a moral requirement, because we've been for many years and decades suffering without no one really listened to the Palestinian people. It happened now in Europe, and everybody see the suffering of the people there, and everybody has to understand that only through political means and dialogue that we can really stabilize the situation in the Middle East as well as the situation in Europe. So a quest for peace and security, for security and development was the motto of Jeddah conference, and it has to be the motto of the world community: peace for everyone and development for all.
Yes, peace for everyone and development for all. That is the main message. I thank you so much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Dr. Mohamed Hegazy, former Assistant to the Foreign Minister. Thank you so much for coming to Nile TV International and always adding value through your analysis. Thank you so much.
Always my pleasure.
And I thank you, dear viewers, for joining us. That was Wednesday debate and the highlights of the important presidential tour of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to Serbia. This is the latest stop, and earlier to Jeddah as well as Berlin. Many thanks for watching.